Member of Parliament for Shipley. He is previously the head of the Better Off Out group in Parliament, and he is also a member of the Department for Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee, of which I believe 10% in 2001's legislation came from the EU, and probably more now. And is also described by some quarters as the most rebellious member of Parliament in Westminster. Finally, we have Wayne Towler, who was previously the EFD, I should say, press officer, and has written for many publications, including The Sprout and Private Eye, of which I think many will recognise this image. So I welcome the panel. I hope for a feisty debate, not too feisty, of course. And I welcome,
in the old days,
David Nuttall to start us off.
Thank you very much indeed, Rory, for that kind introduction. And can I start by, as this is in fact the last actual session of the Freedom Zone, in saying a very big thank you to the Freedom Association for what they've done over the last couple of days, and indeed what they've been doing for a few years now in putting on this Freedom Zone, because it is increasingly becoming the place to be seen, the place to go and listen to a real debate where arguments are not shut up and they are allowed to take place and people can air different views and have debates about things which actually people out there in the country are actually talking about. And that's what people expect to see of a party conference, because we are all a broad church, and it would be a very surprising place indeed if we all agreed about absolutely everything. Now, the definition of what is it? Who is a true Eurosceptic? What does it mean to be a true Eurosceptic? Because unless we decide that, then of course we've no idea of being able to answer this question. I would put forward the submission that anyone really who thinks that Europe is going in the wrong direction, the idea that we're moving towards a centralised European superstate, anybody who poses that is to some extent or another could be regarded as a Eurosceptic. Whether or not putting the word true Eurosceptic makes any difference is a matter that one might wish to debate. But I feel that, in fact, the vast majority of the British people are becoming Eurosceptics at various degrees. Now, I think the challenge that we have is that, well, the challenge that those of us who believe we would be better off out of the European Union is that we have to ensure that a majority of the British people are prepared to take that crucial step in a referendum, as I believe it probably will finish up in our referendum sooner or later, to say, yes, I am prepared to vote for this country to stand on its own 2 feet once again and leave the European Union. And the work that the Better Off Out group has done in Parliament and established it's probably 6 years ago now by Philip, the fact that that group exists at all in Parliament is really just the tip of the iceberg in Parliament as to what's reflected in the country, where I know from my own association that the membership are almost to a man, if you want to be fancy about it, to a woman as well. Eurosceptic. Everybody nowadays is a Eurosceptic, and it's almost something to talk about, to mention, if I come across anybody in my association who is not in favour, at the very least, of a very substantial repatriation of powers. And mostly, they have come to the conclusion, as of course I have, and I'm sure many others in this group have, is that the reality is we're not going to get any powers back, any really meaningful powers back from Europe, and therefore the only solution is to have an in-out referendum and for this country to leave the European Union. Now, frankly, I don't care whether the Conservative Party is more Eurosceptic than the UK Independence Party, than UK. I don't care whether they're more Eurosceptic than the Conservative Party. I am 100% Eurosceptic because my view is that we would certainly be better off outside of the European Union. What is crucially important, absolutely essential, is that all the groups, and they seem to be increasing as the weeks go by, who argue and put forward the case for us to leave the European Union, must work together. They must coalesce around a common set of arguments that we can put forward whenever the referendum debate comes. Because if the British people are faced with 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 or 6 or 7 different organisations putting forward their own nuanced arguments as to why we would be better off out of the European Union, it will be a disaster. We have to unite around a common single message, determine what are the messages that work, and agree that we will all stick to those messages. And it needs to be based on evidence-based research carried out by, I'm not a great fan of focus groups, but let's be honest about it, our opponents will be using focus groups. They'll be using every trick in the book to the establishment, and that's who we'll be up against. We're going to be up against an establishment, and they will use every trick in the book to try and keep the status quo and to keep us in the European Union. And let me say this as well, that just uniting the different groups on the right of British politics is not enough. What we must do, and to win a referendum is absolutely essential, we must get on board those to the left of the political spectrum who also believe in democracy and that this country would be better off having control of its own destiny. We will not win a referendum on the back of Conservative votes alone, or even on the back of Conservative and UKIP votes alone. We need to reach out across the political spectrum, and it might well be a bit odd if I'm sharing the platform with people who are on the far left of British politics, but frankly I care not about that. What matters is the issue. And if the issue is right, I don't mind whether they are members of UKIP or the Liberal Democrats or Green Party or Labour or the Communist Party for that matter, if it's the issue that matters. And we need to build a very wide cross-party coalition if we are to win. And most importantly of all, we must put together the arguments that will win that debate. We must be able to explain to the British people in very simple, straightforward, clear terms why it is that this country would be able to prosper outside of the European Union. And I believe, and I'm sure many in this room will believe, that it is perfectly possible for us as a nation to stand alone on our own 2 feet, and indeed without being bound down by all the rules and regulations and red tape that come out of Brussels, we will in fact be able to prosper as a nation in the 21st century. And it doesn't mean I'm a little Englander, it means I'm a great globalist, because I want this nation to be able to trade with the rest of the world and not be hidebound by an inward-looking European Union. So I hope that we can put any party political differences to one side. Let's concentrate on what really matters for the good of our country and ensure that whenever a referendum comes, and I hope it will be a straightforward in-out referendum, we are ready, and we're ready to win that argument for the sake of the British people.
Well, thank you for that, David. And I then pass the microphone over to Roger.
Thank you very much indeed, Rory. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today. at the Freedom Zone. And as you've heard, I was the chairman of the Freedom Association. The Freedom Zone actually started under my chairmanship, and I have constantly tried to claim credit for it, but of course the credit is actually due to this man, Simon Richards, down here in the front row. I'm delighted to see it going from strength to strength. I'm also delighted to be sharing a platform with MPs of the quality of David Nuttall and Philip Davis, and indeed to be sharing a platform, of course, with Tim and Gawain as well. And what I am not here to do today is to tell you that I am more Eurosceptic than David or more Eurosceptic than Philip, because I think that would be a pointless debate, and so I don't propose to go down that route. Although I may touch on the issue of whether the Conservative Party or UKIP is best placed to make the case, or indeed is making the case. And in that context, I would say that I was a member of the Conservative Party for something like 40 years. I was a Conservative MEP for 12 and a half years, and for most of that 12 and a half years, and especially latterly, I had people from UKIP getting in touch saying, look, you're obviously with us on policy, why on earth don't you come across? And for a long time I was saying, well, when Conservatives were in opposition, I was saying, well, yes, but you wait and see when we have a Conservative Prime Minister, it'll be different then. And I was saying we must work within the Conservative Party and try and bring it in the right direction. And I'm afraid the reason I made my move earlier this year to UKIP was quite simply that there is only so long you can go on making those arguments, and I felt that I wasn't bringing the Conservative Party with me. Let me qualify that, though, because, as David has rightly said, Conservative Party members, in his experience and in my experience, are overwhelmingly Eurosceptic. They selected me 3 times in the East Midlands because they liked what I said. Initially, they liked what I said about Europe, which was quite clear and uncompromising. Last time round, they also liked what I said about climate and energy. So I was very comfortable with the views of Conservative Party members. What I was not comfortable with was the position of Conservative Party leaders. I had this rather curious situation that I left a party where I agreed with the members but fundamentally disagreed with the leadership, and joined a party where I both agreed with the members and the leaders, and that was a salutary experience. Now, there are some people in UKIP who will tell you that renegotiation of our relationship with Europe is not possible. They will say that any renegotiation would require the agreement of the other 26 member states, and that will not be forthcoming, so we can stop thinking about renegotiation. It's a nonsense. I don't necessarily share that view. I take the view that if the government, with a Conservative Prime Minister, were to prepare a very clear and robust shopping list, and take that robust shopping list to Brussels, and say, right, this is what the British people want, perhaps after a general election where those propositions had been part of the manifesto. And if that Prime Minister were to sit down with our friend Mr. Barroso and to say, either we get what is in this shopping list, or we will put it to the British people that we should leave and we will have a referendum to leave, I suspect that we would get at least a great deal of attention, and we might well get agreement to our shopping list. However, we know that that isn't going to happen, because we know that our Prime Minister has said there is no question of an in-out referendum, and Britain benefits by being in the European Union. I would love to have that debate with Mr. Cameron to understand why he thinks we benefit. He insists that the single market is an important benefit to British exporters. I do not myself see any single benefit of European Union membership which could not be achieved by a simple free trade agreement. And I would point to the situation of Canada vis-à-vis the United States. Canada is an independent, democratic country with its own currency, which enjoys a very friendly and profitable trading relationship with its larger neighbour. and I see no reason why Britain should not be an independent, democratic country with its own currency and its own government, enjoying free trade and a profitable relationship with the European Union, or what remains of it after we've left. But I would warn about the current comments being made by the Prime Minister. We all remember the Prime Minister's assertion, of course, that he would give 2007 Sun newspaper a cast iron guarantee of a referendum. It was only after he became Prime Minister, or sorry, just before he became Prime Minister, that he said, well, of course, that was conditional upon our not having ratified the Lisbon Treaty, but of course, now that we have ratified it, there can be no question of a referendum. Which is rather curious, because if you consider the only referendum on Europe we have ever had in 1975, that, of course, was a post facto referendum. We had joined, under Ted Heath's leadership, we had joined the then common market, and then there was an election at which Harold Wilson came to power. Harold Wilson had opposed the common market settlement and said, I will go and negotiate a new dispensation, and if I can do that successfully, I will put it to the British people in a referendum. He went away and produced a couple of concessions, which were in fact nugatory. I can't even remember what they were now, and they are long since forgotten by history. But he was able to wave them in his hand like Chamberlain and peace in our time, we have a new settlement. And he came back, and on that basis, he supported a yes vote in a referendum, which only those of us who are over 58 years old, and amongst whom I number myself, actually were able to vote, and I apologise here and now to all of you for the fact that I voted the wrong way at the time. But there is a precedent for a post facto referendum. You cannot say, because this has been ratified, we cannot now have a referendum. And what are we now promised? We're now promised the opportunity for a new settlement, perhaps introducing some rather strange measure where there would be a different budget for the Eurozone and the rest of the European Union. And if we can negotiate something that looks a bit like that, it will be put to the British people. How will it be put to the British people? Well, perhaps in a referendum, or perhaps in a general election. We're not even being offered. We were denied the referendum for which there was a cast iron guarantee. We're now being told that there may be a referendum, where the choice will be essentially a choice between the status quo or more of the same. And that is no choice at all. So I agree 100% with David. We must have an in-out referendum. That is what the public will understand. That is what the public want. And that can re-establish the independence and democracy of our country. That is the position of the party which I am now a part of and am privileged to represent. It is certainly the policy of sound people like David, like Philip, like Douglas Carswell, like folk of that kind. Sadly, it is not the policy of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Roger. And now I pass the microphone over to Graham for more follow-up.
Thank you, Ryan. I follow up the thanks to Simon, and thank you very much for inviting me. This is quite odd for me. This is the first time I've made a sort of party political speech. Normally I just get to speak about technical stuff, so please bear with me. One of the things I find quite interesting and is that we were called and we were expecting a feisty debate. Well, so far it's not particularly feisty, is it? We all seem to agree with each other. Please, in the audience, when you ask your questions, please be feisty, because we're not good at it. Now, another thing that seems to be picked up is this idea that many Conservative activists are less than enamoured with the current party policy on the European Union. Indeed, for many years now, and this isn't a new thing, many Conservative activists, of which I was one, I stood for election a couple of times in the Scottish Parliament for central Glasgow, try it. And what was always the case is that when it came to European elections, many of us Tories, as I was then, were somewhat sympathetic. I've got a suspicion my mother votes UKIP in European elections. She's a Conservative Association committee member. And there was this lovely piece by Paul Goodman in the Telegraph just before our conference in this very town, city indeed, in which he talked about the don't ask, don't tell policy of Bill Clinton engaged in the military. And in this case, he was talking about the fact that one of his 3 key association members was thought to vote UKIP at European elections, but don't ask, don't tell, because if I found out, I'd have to throw him out of the party. What proportion of your friends in the Tory party would come under that particular brief? How many Tory activists today consider, or indeed vote, for UKIP in European elections? To ask the question is to answer it, you know. And so it is an interesting echo. I mean, we all share, I think, at least on this panel, a belief that this country is not so bad. In fact, indeed, it is a very fine country and is quite capable of moving forward, moving on, under its own steam, with all the risks and all the threats that that encompasses. It is the case that, as many people have said, freedom is dangerous. It's risky. It's quite scary. You become responsible for yourself. But as one has children and your children grow up, you give them responsibility, you give them freedom, and by and large they grow into it. And the thought that we must remain within the confines, holding onto nurse, we must remain within some confines of some protective bubble that is the European Union, is both politically ridiculous and morally wrong. Because if we do not trust people with their own futures, if we do not trust this country with its own future, then what are we? We are just adolescents. And to think that this country which we all love so much, is adolescent in the world is absurd. We must have the confidence that we can be free, we can be independent, we can hold that liberty with the responsibility that entails. We will make our own mistakes and be responsible for those mistakes. So the future, once we have left the European Union, will not be comfortable, will not be easy, will not be gentle. It will be our problem. And so be it. We must take that responsibility. So there is this lovely idea that those of us who believe in that Britain should be better off out, would be better off out, will be better off out, have some idea that life will be easy. I don't know, homework will be abolished, old maids will find husbands, this sort of carry on. The tap will always be clean, the beer will always be shiny. Not true. It will be tough, it will be hard. And we must never allow those that wish us to stay in the European Union to think that we pretend that we think things will be easy. It won't. There will be costs. I mean, Roger talks about show me something from the European Union that makes life that is better than us being independent. Personally, I can't think of any. But that does not mean that it will be easy, and never pretend that it will be easy. I mean, we go back to the main point, as David focused on, what is a real Eurosceptic, and I will agree with him. A real Eurosceptic is somebody who believes this country is better governing itself, that we trust the people of this country to make decisions for us, and I think we can all agree on that. And the problem that we face is that none of the parties in government, or indeed in opposition, at least in Westminster, happen, at least at their top level, at least at their policy-making level, happen to believe that that's the case. Now, I was on the way here from New Street. I popped into a pub called the Wellington, well-named, and I had some different photographs, so I had a couple of pints. And there, the publican himself is a Lib Dem voter in Westminster elections, but is a UKIP voter in general elections. I mean, you talk about, it's not just Tories. I mean, indeed, last night I was in a pub in Exmoor, and exactly the same thing. He had a proud photograph of him and Nick Harvey, his local MP, pulling pints in his pub. And when it came to Europe, oh, no, I vote UKIP in European elections. He's a Lib Dem voter in Westminster, he's a UKIP voter in European elections. So this idea that it's just Tories, it's just people, the sort of people in this room who wish our country to be free, who have confidence in this country, is bunk. Utter bunkum. There are, within, one of the pleasures of working with UKIP is the broad range of people that I come into daily contact with. our PCC candidate in Derbyshire, former Labour councillor, Lib Dems in various places, particularly in the southwest. It is not a left, right, centre issue. It's a democracy issue. And if you believe in democracy, you believe in our people. I sadly don't think that the current governing coalition, or at least the management of that governing coalition, actually has the confidence that I have in this country.
Right. Well, thank you for that. It's getting feistier. Now, over to Tim for some of his thoughts.
Thank you very much, Roy. I will be in danger of becoming very repetitive, but I want to add my own thanks to Simon Richards for everything he's done with this Freedom Zone. And Simon's not only a great organiser and a great innovator, but he's also one of the great gentlemen of politics. Just a nice guy, but he did encourage us to be feisty on this panel. And at the moment we're being very gentlemanly and civilised, and I don't think I'm going to deviate too much from that, but I think what I'm going to say is more in sorrow than anger, but just sketch where I see the Eurosceptic language and the challenges at the moment, and then look forward to your responses. First of all, I think we should not underestimate the opposition to us. We look at polls and we see a lot of Euroscepticism, a lot of support for fundamental renegotiation or even leaving the European Union altogether, which would be my ideal option. I think it's the ideal option of all of us on this panel. Forgive me, those of you who were at the meeting yesterday with the Taxpayers Alliance and the Express, but just to repeat, I think we should be aware that, you know, in every referendum there is this huge swing to the status quo when a referendum happens. Dan Hannan spoke about this and said, you know, he's campaigned all across Europe for various Eurosceptic motions, and he's seen one after another defeated because the people go for the comfort zone again and again. So we have a slender lead in lots of opinion polls, we have a slightly better lead in other opinion polls, but actually when it comes down to the vote, we should not underestimate the extent to which the people will not choose the exciting freedom vision that Graham talked about. There will be a bogus renegotiation ahead of a referendum. You know, there will be something that Europe will say that they are changing. They will say that Europe is different from the way it was. They will try and convince us, therefore, that to just give them a little bit more time. It won't be what is versus what we promised. They will also be saying that they are different and Europe is moving on. We will have business largely against us if we do not do something about that. One of the reasons we stayed out of the euro, it was crucial, the Business for Sterling organisation. There is nothing equivalent to that at the moment that is on our side. And of course we will have the BBC, a Guardian establishment against us, painting us all as swivel-eyed loons, as they always do. So let us not, at the beginning, assume that this task of either fundamental renegotiation or leaving the European Union is going to be at all easy for us to win. That is that side of the argument. And so therefore, where are we? Where are the Eurosceptics? How are our troops organised in order to win that battle? And I'm afraid for a very long time, if you look at Eurosceptic groups and campaign organisers, it's People Front of Judea, Judean People Front territory, and it has been for, you know, a very long time. You know, it's lots of mom and pop, man and dog operations. I've lost count of the number of different groups that have different slogans, different websites, some of them incredibly amateurish, some of them better. But we are an incredibly divided organisation. I'm afraid often characterised by very significant personal enmities going back to 20, 25 years. And what we are now seeing, of course, is that division at an organisational movement level, if you like, now transferred onto the party level as well. So that, you know, Roger and I, you know, we were together on platforms last year as fellow Conservatives, and now we're on the same platform and still friends, but we're now in different parties. And the only person who really benefits from that is Ed Miliband, is the Europhiles, because that's what they want. They want a divided right. Now, I am not, Roger will say, UKIP will say, well, they had to form that because the Conservative Party had failed to deliver. And I understand that argument, and we can have that debate. But whatever the cause, and whether Roger was right or not to leave, we have different views on that. The fact is that it is a tragedy that has come to this, because it is now much harder for Eurosceptic parties to win general elections. I am disappointed he left, because I think despite the leadership of David Cameron on this issue, or the non-leadership of David Cameron on this issue, the Conservative Party has been moving in the right direction for a very long time. I think the party is probably as split on Europe as it was historically, but it's split in a different way. It's no longer a split between people who are very supportive of the European Union and those who are sceptical. It's split between those who are sceptical and want renegotiation. And I think about a third of the parliamentary party who want to come out altogether. The centre of gravity has shifted dramatically, but we are, I'm afraid, still split. But the direction of travel is clear. And you know, one of the heroes of last year, forget the EU veto moment when David Cameron was forced into that veto of the EU treaty, the moment of last year was down to this man, David Nuttall. That rebellion... those 81 Conservative MPs, that's what forced David Cameron to take that position. And it will be a historic moment in the Conservative Party that David can always be incredibly proud of and for leading, and all of the 81 people who took part in that vote. And it is for me a tragedy that we are now we've not all together. Roger Gwynne and all Nigel Farage is an incredibly accomplished, attractive politician, and the fact that he is not with us inside the Conservative Party is a tragedy. Now, of course, we can disagree and argue about why this has happened, but my plea and my hope is that somehow, as Eurosceptics, we can find a way not of looking back all the time, not looking at the wounds and the reasons why we have got into this position, but begin some sort of effort, whether it is just at the moment sitting down and regularly talking to each other, whether it is getting round someone like Matthew Elliott, the most able campaigner on the centre-right who ran the No to AV campaign, to start to put a campaign involving business, detailed research and language to build a united Eurosceptic movement. Yes, we are not going to agree on everything altogether, but we need a forum where we start talking. And I'm actually quite encouraged that so far this afternoon it's been a civilised discussion. And I think we need, as a movement, to look forward, not at the things that have divided us up until this point.
Well, thank you very much for that, Tim. Very kind of you. So the point is to look forward and see how we can combine forces and go with the future. Now, the panel have been very kind with their time, and I know there are many questions that want to come from the floor. So Philip has very kindly given his time to the floor, and so if anyone would like to ask a question,
yes,
I will take. He can have the first question. I'll go with a round of three. So if I could have two others who would like to ask, the lady in the row behind, and also the gentleman at the front.
May I say how much I agree and admire everybody on the panel, and not just for their good looks, for what you said and what you want, but I do just think that there's a quicker route to what we all want, and that is to move Cameron. And I'd just like to say what I've done my bit about this today. I was introduced by a very big contributor to Boris. I shook him by the hand, and I was introduced because I am head of fundraising for the city of Birmingham, Sutton Coldfield, and we are making a huge progress. And our whole idea is to fund the Conservative Party, but to move it. So it does give us what the voters want, and all the voters, not just the Conservatives. And so I said to Boris, your job is to swing Cameron and move him. And he said he would.
Heartening to hear.
Big news!
Right, you heard it here first. But if I go over to the lady in white just behind the gentleman.
It's Sue Doughty from Woking Conservatives, and we are united and we are Eurosceptic, although UKIP always stands a candidate against John Redwood. Very, very odd thing to do.
Yes, we have a microphone. Sorry.
Hello. Is it on? Hello, I'm Sue Doughty. I'm from Woking Conservatives. And, it's a very Eurosceptic united party, and I don't know why UKIP always stand a candidate against it. My question is, how come there are no women on the platform, and why do you think that elderly spinsters want to get married?
And thank you for that. And the gentleman in the front row.
It's been said that UKIP will probably come first in the European elections in 2014, and I think that's probably true. That probably is going to happen, and I think the Conservatives are going to come third. UKIP's been doing pretty well for quite a while now, but as far as they, in terms of what they say they're doing, but what have they actually achieved in the past few years, other than actually fracturing the Eurosceptic votes, and what do you think they're actually going to achieve in the future, if anything?
Right, well, if I could start then thinking about the third question with Roger on that note. Would you like to respond?
Well, yes, indeed, thank you. We start with the consensus because we think we're going to win 2014 too, and we are determined to do so. What have we achieved? Well, I think we put the fear of God into David Cameron. He knows he's got a problem, he doesn't know how to respond to it yet. And we have been clear that we are prepared to talk terms. Unfortunately, the Conservative hierarchy is not prepared to talk terms. I'm not here to negotiate on behalf of Nigel Farage, but if we could start out with a firm commitment, as Nigel said, written in blood, to an in-out referendum, that would be a great start. I think that we've done remarkably well as a party. I mean, 3-4 years ago, where were we? 2 or 3% in the polls. Now we're frequently ahead of the Lib Dems, arguably the third party. And we are providing an alternative for Eurosceptics, yes, from the Conservative Party, but also from other parties, and there are Eurosceptics in other parties. And we have therefore moved the debate forward and will continue to do so. I don't see us forming a government in the near future, but I do see us having a major influence on the way the political discourse in this country goes.
Right. And how about the second question and the first? Any comments on that?
Oh, why are there no women? Well, I can duck out of that one because I didn't organise the panel. And people who know me will agree that I do like having women around the place and would have been delighted to have a woman on the panel. And as for Boris, I'm delighted to hear that news. I think some of the things that Boris says are jolly sound. And if he can change Cameron's mind, I will be very pleased indeed, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
No.
And Philip, do you have anything to add onto this?
Well, in terms of Boris, I don't particularly hold out a great deal of hope for Boris, to be perfectly honest. I'm a big fan of his, but not for being Prime Minister. I mean, I don't think... I think just on a basic level, the public want the Prime Minister to look like a Prime Minister. I don't really think they want them to resemble a...
I'm not asking you to do Prime Minister. He's moving Cameron.
I'm not in the the Boris for everything camp.
Shame.
in terms of the women on the platform, David will know better than me because he now chairs the Better Off Out group. But I'm not aware of any women MPs who are in Better Off Out. There may well be some.
Heather Wheeler.
Oh, Heather Wheeler. Absolutely. So. There's a sort of very limited pool of women to choose from to come on the panel for MP. So all I would encourage you to do, if you want more women MPs on a Better Off Out sort of style panel, is to encourage more women MPs to join Better Off Out. Yeah. That'd be a good starting point. And in terms of UKIP, I mean, I very much agreed with Tim's analysis, really. And I know, people in UKIP say, that they've move the Conservative Party and all this, but I think it ties back to the first point, to be perfectly honest, and that is the problem with the UKIP strategy is that the fewer Conservatives that are in the Conservative Party, the less conservative the Conservative Party will be. And you don't get the Conservative Party to be more conservative by having all the Conservatives leaving it. And it seems to me, if all the Conservatives leave the Conservative Party, then complain that it's not conservative enough, it seems that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to me. So, I mean, these things really, you know, in many respects we split hairs because we do all agree about we do all want the same objective. It is always a matter of what is the best strategy. I personally believe that more can be achieved from within, such as the vote on the referendum that Tim mentioned, that could only have been done in Parliament. That couldn't have been done by anybody outside of Parliament. Those things are important. And you know, I think there will be a Conservative government that takes us out of the EU long before there will be a UKIP government. So all of these things are about how we best achieve what we want to see. And so, you know, it's all a matter of strategy. But the key thing, I think, comes back to the point that David made at the very start, is, you know, whatever our own particular belief is what the right strategy is and which party we are best belonging to pursue our strategy. That's for each individual to make up their own mind. Obviously, I want them to be in the Conservative Party, but that's for each individual to make their own mind up. The key thing is we've got to work together. And when you've got different people standing against each other, when actually they hold the same opinions, that really doesn't achieve anything for anybody. And even, you know, when UKIP stand against people like Bill Cash, we've got a problem. Because, you know, whatever you might think, you know, Bill Cash has been an absolute Trojan in all of this, and that cannot be a sensible way forward, whichever party we belong to.
Any more questions, please?
I think I have to answer a particular question.
All right. Right. Happy
A couple of points. The redoubtable Ms. Doughty from letters pages and the internet.
Yes.
Two things. The Spinster comment was a rather rough quote from the Reverend Samuel Smith about the 1832 Reform Act, but that be that as it may. On John Redwood, I'm sorry, did you see what he said yesterday?
No, I missed him.
We must keep quiet, we mustn't rock the boat, we mustn't make so much of an effort. We must all come together on a very gentle... No, I'm sorry, it's too late. It's been 20... It's on the BBC. It's been too many years of being nice. Actually, we need to act. We need to do something about it. And though Mr. Redwood, when he was a minister and before and after, and he stood for leadership of the party and so on and so forth, has been a sound Eurosceptic for many, many years, and I would agree. Actually, he's a dead weight on the movement of moving it forward, because his is the voice of calm contemplation. Well, fine, but actually, have you seen what's going on in Brussels at present? Have you seen the changes they're planning? If we stick with calm contemplation, as we have done for many, many years since the ECA, we get nowhere and we lose. And in the end, you have to stand up and shout. And I'm sorry, calm contemplation does not get us to where we want to be.
The lady there, the lilac jacket, the gentleman on the same row, and the gentleman behind him.
Caroline Stratford Beaconsfield. Chairman, when the leadership election was taking place, it was my clear understanding that David Cameron went round the country that he was Eurosceptic. And I think a lot of people thought he was Eurosceptic. Now, if people agree with me, could David Nuttall and Philip Davies please ascertain why our leader won't be Eurosceptic? Could I say to Roger Helmer that the leader of his party would carry more people with him if at times he could be a little more polite?
Not true.
I just wanted to raise a question of how much financial muscle we're going to have when the referendum, or whatever sort of referendum comes around. It's bound to be slanted. As sure as God made little green apples, it will be slanted or twisted in some way to favour the status quo. Presumably we're going to need some sort of fighting fund to mount a judicial review to make sure that the actual wording of the referendum and also the summary that goes with it for the pros and cons is properly drafted to give a full and fair vote for the British people. And I'm hoping that we will have the money to actually do this. This organisation, I mean, perhaps that's something you